Hey guys, I'm SaltEMike, and this is your Star Citizen Week in Review for May 25th, 2021. Yeah, Week in Review coming out on a Tuesday. It's sort of a blessing in disguise. We have 3.13.1 going live, and with that, the Invictus event massive funding drive. 3.14 roadmap was completely decimated, and the video content has a lot of interesting information and tidbits on upcoming features. So, let's check them out. And as always, if this is your first week in review, this is the video each week where I put together all of the official Star Citizen news from the previous week. This week's a slight exception, and insert my opinions in there as well. Also, I do live stream on Twitch every day but Monday and Tuesday starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time at twitch.tv/SaltEMike. So if you want to talk about any of the subjects that we talked about today or just say hello, yeah, come check it out, hit the follow button, and say hello. Now, let's get into the video, starting out with patch notes. We had 2 PTUs and 3.13.1 going live, like I previously mentioned. So with PTU J, it was just building off of last week's PTUs, which the focus is mostly on Fleet Week and getting that bug fixed. There was also a small fix for losing ship functionality if you got in or out of the pilot seat during quantum travel. And yeah, moving on to 3.13.1K, this was just a weird one where they moved where the PU was on the menu, plus a crash and server fix. And then lastly, 3.13.1 going live with the culmination of all of the PTUs we discussed on Week in Review over the last couple weeks, as well as the start of that Invictus event. More on that later. Roadmap updates. We had progress tracker updates for Q1 2022. So we're going to do the positive stuff first, the things that got added. They had identity service, AI untrained and planetary navigation, space station clinics, and Grimhex hospitals. It's basically taking the hospital system and bringing them up to space stations. Cockpit button animations, derelict spaceships, points of interest. I found this to be kind of weird because we already have them, but I think they're just gamifying them more from what I can see here. Mission manager updates, ships, the whole D and E 600i gold standard, and the Greycat buggy gold standard. Lava tech obviously needed for the pyro system and ecosystem enhancements. Temporarily removed from the roadmap, Bounty Hunter V2, multi-grid SDF, cap ship destruction, weapon misfire, wear and tear. They also had a rename. Small Home Outpost was renamed to Outpost Homestead and Independent and Outlaw. I think this means that there's going to be other variants of these instead of just all the same outposts that we have currently in the game. Then the RSI Scorpius was also added as well. We'll talk about that more later, of course. Release view. There was a few things added. They added 317 to the release view. They also added the 3 capacitor jobs to 314, so hopefully we get that. It is tentative, so things are still probably going to move. Volumetric clouds, the Scorpius was added. Hull C, Hull A, and the Hangar Manager app to all different parts of release view. This is the delay portion. This is the decimation. It was all basically because of one team. The actor teams, basically. And these are the teams that delivered like food and drink, the hot and cold systems, and things like that, force reactions, everything. Everything they've done so far has come into the game and has been somewhat working, with the exception of like body dragging and force reactions. I think force reactions are really weird, and body dragging obviously has its issues. So I kind of want to give these guys a pass. I think what they did was they just took on more than they could handle. When you see what was moved from 314 that these guys handled to 315, personal inventory, healing, FPS radar and scanning, hacking, NPC healing, Cure Life medical tool, and multi-tool healing attachment. That's a lot of things on top of the other things that they actually are getting into 314. It's just a ton of stuff. So they delivered these things pretty well over the last year or so, and I think they just had to continue to grow until they hit their maximum, and I think we found out where their maximum is. So with that, all those things were 314 moved to 315. Because of that, everything from 315 moves to 316. Weapon charge drain, EVA tier 2, salvage, 0G push and pull, multi-tool salvage attachment. And then 316 to 317, ladders, player interaction experience, and cutting tier 2. Also temporarily removed from the roadmap mag stripping, locker and inventory, which is like huge, fire extinguisher, weapon misfire wear, vehicle module swapping. I did a much more detailed feeling of how I feel about this in Answer the Call this week, so link will be up there if you guys want to check that out. It's about an hour-long podcast where we talked about how we felt about the roadmap changes and what it means to us. More importantly, at the end, Jake, who is a member of the community team, who was also a live streamer, YouTuber, podcaster for Star Citizen for many, many years with INN and Relay, is now a member of the community team, and he handles the roadmap roundup every week. And he really wanted to hammer home the idea that this is not a marketing tool. This is an honest and open thing to share what their plans are and what they're working on. And he gave us bad news before a big funding drive, and that literally proves that they don't use this as a marketing tool, right? Because if they did, they would just wait till after. It's just another week or two, right? So it wouldn't have really mattered that much, and if they wanted to do that, they could have. And I think this shows how important it is that passionate members of the community are part of the Star Citizen project on like actually working there. I never saw this kind of passion prior to Jake taking over the roadmap. And I think that really shows that members of the community care about this game more than anybody. And it's not necessarily, it may not necessarily be a place where you just get a paycheck. There's always going to be more than that for a member of the Star Citizen community, right? So thank you, Jake. I know that's a lot of like Jake simping there, but I think it's really well deserved. So moving on to video updates, we had a beefy ISC, SCL, and a bonus video from Tony Z, which is kind of the blessing in the sky for being a little bit late this week. Starting out with ISC, they had a Scorpius featurette, which is the new ship that's coming online. And the first question we typically think and they answer is, why make the ship in the first place?
We have a lot of fighters in Star Citizen, and they cover a huge plethora of combat styles. One area that we have only a few ships filling is this two-person heavy escort fighter role.
Yeah, so only the Super Hornet and the Hurricane fit in the role of the Scorpius, but the way multi-crew ships work in Star Citizen currently is most of them just are solo ships with a turret, so it feels like the need for the Scorpius doesn't really exist. But once we start to see operator modes and more multi-crew functionality make sense, then we'll kind of see the reasoning why the Scorpius makes sense as far as another option to build out with this kind of turret, single-seater, two-seater kind of ship here. So the ship obviously looks familiar, and we cannot ignore its X-Wing vibes, and they touch on that here.
And ultimately, we ended up on the one that had sort of an X formation. It's common within sci-fi, but we've yet to do it in the Star Citizen universe. I was just like, let's just own this. This is where we've arrived. Looks really cool. Let's just go for it.
So I actually love their explanation here. There are other sci-fi universes that have X-shaped ships. Babylon 5 was the first thing that comes to mind. You know, Star Wars doesn't necessarily own that. So there's nothing wrong with taking inspirations from other places, and I'm glad they just owned it, because it didn't seem like they owned the Vulture, I think it was. The one that was more like the Eve ship. Maybe they didn't even know, but who knows. But yeah, the Vulture is one of those ships where they didn't address it as much, and this one they really did. Okay, so we have to now, we got through all that. What is it? What makes it different? What makes it special?
The RSI Scorpius is a two-player ship. It has a pilot and a remote turret gunner. They both access the ship via a side ladder, much like some of our other ships. And what makes this ship different to our other fighters in this area is that second player has access to a remote turret that can also change states and sort of track round to the underside of the ship. So if you are in a scenario where you have an attacker above or below you and your pilot cannot alter course for whatever reason, you yourself are able to go move the turret to account for that.
Alright, so obviously that turret is really cool, but that turret only matters if positional combat exists in Star Citizen, both against NPCs and players. And we have yet to see that. So there's a lot of changes coming. I really hope the vehicle experience team and feature team can make that a possibility. But until then, this ship doesn't feel that special to me or that valuable until we know that positional combat is delivered and going to be a thing, right? And I think people were expecting this to be a straight to flyable, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's good that it's not. Is it comes Q1 2022, I think, and that will allow it the time it needs to be viable in the game. And then lastly on the ship, we got to know what kinds of arms it comes with.
So the pilot has access to 4 size 3 mounts on the wingtips. These come with size 2 gimbaled weapons by default, so you have a lot of forward-facing firepower there. And then you also have 2 missile racks built into the hull, and these come with 4 size 2 missiles by default on each side. So again, it's all about the forward-facing firepower for the pilot, so they can concentrate on just flying and attacking things in their frontal arc.
Personally, I feel like this is way too much firepower because a turret with 4 size 3 fixed guns plus an additional possibility of 4 size 3 fixed guns, all slave to the pilot. You know, they're fixed, but still, 8 guns size 3 is a lot. But one thing we have to remember is this is classified as a heavy fighter, and even though it looks super sleek, super agile, it probably won't be. So that will likely be the balance behind all of those weapons, but I still do feel that it's a bit overboard. We don't have any other ships that really have that kind of firepower. I guess the Vanguard, because it has a possibility for a really big gun on its nose, but yeah, I think we'll have to see with all of the future changes coming to combat and flight. We'll have to see how that all plays out. They also had a sprint report this week, but it was the environmental sprint report, so it's not a whole lot of things to discuss, but it's mostly visual. So looking at hospitals, they look basically done. They look like they're on the polishing phase of it, and they are. And what is why we don't have them is the fact that the actor teams did not get the work and the gameplay related to them done. So we got to wait on hospitals for another quarter, but they look really good. The next thing is exploring canyon assets, and we've seen stuff like this before, but like, you know, we saw them like making arches and other things. That doesn't mean that those things are going to come to the game anytime soon, and personally I think they look really weird. Canyons are kind of made by water, right? The erosion from rivers and things like that, and we just don't really get that from this test, so I don't think that's necessarily what this test was for. So we'll have to see what that is, but I don't expect to see that coming into the game like in 3.14 or anything. Then we see more from homesteads, and they start out with something that I'm a sucker for. They had plants at 3 different stages of growth and mentioned that those plants could have harvestables that you can extract and sell or use or whatever. So I just imagined traveling throughout the universe, finding seeds, planting them, all that kind of stuff. I think it's pretty cool. Bit of gameplay possibilities there. They also show a really unfinished internal review of these homesteads. And yeah, I mean, you got to remember these are coming with pyro, so when they show the exterior, that's a pyro moon or planet, and you just got to remember it's going to be a little bit of time before we see these. Crusader, moving on to that, they showed an Orison at night lighting pass, and this is just a screenshot or stream. It's beautiful, it looks awesome, and yeah, looking forward to checking it out. Hope there's some cool stuff to do there as well. Moving on to SCL, the first 30 minutes of Star Citizen Live were pretty boring and kind of like snooze-worthy almost, but the second half was filled with information and was really nice. So we're going to start out with a question that was asked about military armor. Will military ships have special armor, and can we swap armor out between our ships?
Yes, there will be different materials for military and civilian ships, and we can even go down to the granularity of like this variant of the ship has a slightly hardened material that gives it some improved properties. In the first version of the physical damage rollout, we would not be letting you swap these things out. Whether we change that in the future, that's up for debate internally, but it's going to be such an apocalyptic change to how the game plays when that comes in. Like all the existing meta for combat and damage and gameplay will be null and void with it, because you'll be moving away from this DPS race of just decreasing 1,000 hit points to 0 and winning, to moving to targeting specific areas and disabling ships and doing something with those disabled ships.
So we got a lot more out of this question from John other than just armor, right? All of these things he talked about adds choice and situations, like John said, and yeah, it makes what we play now completely irrelevant. And I think that's why PvPers are like, they're kind of upset that they feel like they're not really getting the love that they deserve, and they do deserve some, but the fact that like the game we're playing now is not the game that we're going to be playing at all in the future, sort of shows why maybe they didn't invest much time into stuff like that. The next question was about medium fighters and why they're not really viable in the game. Think like the Hornet, and how they're going to address that.
There are other features coming. It's what's to refer to as capacitors, but we're probably going to rebrand it slightly to something more better player facing, because capacitors can give a slightly different impression on what they actually do. But as a result of that, we are literally changing the stats on every single spaceship. So they are all having changes done to not only handling but health. All the weapons are having some changes done to them in terms of lethality. Ballistic weapons having changes done to their ammo count. So again, it's going to be a huge change, and all the ships are going to have a big shuffle around in terms of their combat prowess. And hopefully, as a result of that, certainly from our internal testing, it seems to be the case that those medium fighters are in a better place, because they seem to get overshadowed by the light and the heavy fighters. Everyone just goes, if I want agility, light fighter. If I want to go tankiness, go heavy fighter.
So starting to have a theme here, capacitors and all these things are going to be, overarching changes throughout the entire system of how we fly, how we shoot, and all these things. And because they're able to do that, this allows them to address the issue with medium fighters. Now, I wouldn't hold my breath on these things. This is a huge undertaking. There's going to be problems. There's going to be oversights. There's going to be ships out of balance. But hopefully they do address the medium ship issue. Also related to this, there was a question asked on what is your intention for the time to kill in Star Citizen?
But as a general broad, extremely broad, don't hold me to this in many patches time. It is not going to be the short, like 10, 15 seconds that we can experience now in those scenarios where fights are over before you know it. And if you get two good players together, they might stretch to a minute or two dogfighting. It is going to be longer than that. Combat now is definitely not how it's going to be, with not even in the next few patches, but let alone with physical damage, because the combat till then is very much time to kill. Like, the outcome of combat is somebody explodes every single time, and that's the only outcome there is at the moment. And the chance of that happening with physical damage is radically reduced, because that's only going to happen like if you do a critical hit to their power plant and it explodes. You're much more likely to then have a disabled ship that either needs boarding or salvaging or tractor beaming away. And then on the flip side of that, it's you in your disabled ship figuring out what you are now going to do as a result of your ship being damaged, because previously you'd just be dead and there's no choice there. But do you stay with your wreck? Do you fight off the attackers? Do you hide on board your ship and hope they don't come and find you? Do you call for backup? It's just going to change everything.
And I want to start out with big ups to Jared, because he followed up with this question, and that's really important for us. That's something that really matters to, I think, everybody in Star Citizen. So big up to Jared for that. And time to disable was really hammered home again here, and all the choice that comes with that. I think they give us a really nice response on where they're at right now and how they feel about it, and how every time you win a PvP experience, it's always an explosion. Everybody dies. It's not good. So time to kill is what I like the way they talked about it, how rare an explosion will happen, and how hard you have to work towards to make it happen. Then the last thing that we'll talk about from SCL is dropships and why they aren't viable in the game, because I can pile a bunch of people into a Cutlass. Why would I use a a Vanguard or any other type of dropship in the game.
The big thing that will stop this, or maybe not stop, because I know how tenacious people are doing things, that will disincentivize it will be the life support system. So the ships are all going to have a life support item on there, and that life support item is going to be tuned for that ship and that ship's crew. So its life support generates the oxygen and scrubs all the carbon dioxide out. So it will be filling it at a rate that the designated crew can consume. So if you've suddenly got 5 people in the back of your 100i that's only designed to take 1 person, you're going to be using the air 5 times quicker than the system can produce it at a very basic, simplistic level. So I guess the air's going to run out and you're going to be stuck in your spacesuits, and then you're going to use your spacesuit air, and then bad things are going to happen.
I just want to note they also mention force reactions later in the video. So like you would have to be strapped into a ship most likely because you would get injured or die during travel. But the main thing was life support and how they would be prioritized on ships like these because of the needs of the ship, whereas other ships would not have that level of life support. Next is the kind of blessing in the sky that we were a little bit late this week. Tony Z put out a video titled Quantum, Quasar and Virtual AI, and yeah, it was... it's a 40-minute video. It's long, it's detailed, so I just want to tell you what it is, basically, in this video, and then we're going to touch on it in a future video later in the week, so get subscribed if you haven't yet. It is a polished, free, ramble-free Tony Z video. Do you know how rare that is, guys? That's rare. So he explains basically the work that he's done over the last 2 years on this thing. And it has a lot of discussion about tech that either doesn't exist yet or is in the process of being created. So that video that I plan on doing is likely going to be different than the videos that other content creators make about it, like an overview of it. I highly suggest you watch the video because of the lack of ramble, because of the lack of I think it was a really well put together video, and it doesn't require a content creator to break it down. So I do plan on making a video, but it's not necessarily what you would expect from a typical Star Citizen content creator. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing it, and I hope it ends up pretty good. So moving on to the final section of the video, other updates, we had the Scorpius that went on sale. It's $200 for all real money, or $220 if you use any store credit. There's also a package that comes with it that you can get the Mantis with it with $315 and $350. There was a Q&A about the Scorpius. I don't want to point out too many things here. I think the main thing I want to point out is the comparisons they made to other ships. So it's basically between a Super Hornet and a Vanguard. And we'll have to see when that comes online, though, because there's a lot of changes coming to combat. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I do apologize for my voice, though. I lost it during work this weekend, and it still is struggling to come back. But again, the comparisons thing I thought was important. There are a lot of questions about the turret. I think a lot of those answers were really obvious, but if you have any questions about the Scorpius's turret, the Q&A will be linked in the description below, along with everything that we discuss on today's video. The Invictus event. It is the main funding drive every year, along with IAE. So they have 2 funding drives. This is the military-based one in starting May 21st, ending June 1st. There will be a number of ships for rent for free each day or every couple of days. Those ships rotate and change, so you can try out literally everything that is currently flyable in the game. And then the last couple of days, you have the option to try out everything. And CIG put out a really nice guide for players about the event, especially new players, on how to experience it and all those things. So again, link to that will be in the description down below. Lots of ships for sale. I'm sure there'll be a few more surprises other than the Scorpius as well. Ship loaner matrix updates. So they basically just added the C2 to the mix and remove loaners for ships who have been recently delivered to the game. So, ships that are considered loaners or needed loaners don't need them anymore, right? There was a lore post titled Showdown United in Purpose. Feel free to check that out. And lastly, a sneak peek of the Crusader arcade. I hope it's just not an arcade that you look at and go, wow, an arcade, and walk away. I hope it has some interactions, but I doubt it will. So with that said, guys, that will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit a like, leave a comment on anything that we discussed today, as well as what I may have missed on today's show. Obviously, I didn't go too deep into Invictus. Feel free to check out the links and see if there's any ships you want to purchase, check out, rent, or anything like that. I guess the one thing that I did miss is during the Invictus event, you can tour the biggest ship that you can purchase in Star Citizen, the Javelin. I just didn't happen to have that in my notes for some reason, so make sure you guys check that out as well. There's really good signage that tells you when it's going to be at the landing location of that you're at, so I think that's really cool. And yeah, guys, I'll see you next week, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the video, and make sure you subscribe to follow up on that new quantum video from Tony Z. Bye, everybody. Have a great one.